put 2 L's in your name instead of 1.
Wow.
Survivor specialists Alexa and Phil are back, and you just got a really fun intro into what our conversations behind the scenes are like. I'm asking Phil how many L's are in his name. So clearly we're talking about some hard-hitting stuff. And speaking of hard-hitting, we are going to talk on our 4th retrospective podcast.
Is it 4 already? My gosh. Yeah, because we did our 4th Q&A. So this is already our 4th retrospective. So for all the $10 patrons, you've already given us $40. And for any of you who are $20 patrons since the start, you've given us $80. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. So much. We are going, in the spirit of the premiere of Survivor Extinction Island, we are going to be talking about all islands on Survivor, and not as simple as like what islands they've lived on. This is the multitude of exile islands that we've had. This will be Cochrane's exile boat yacht. This will be Redemption Island. This will be Extinction Island. We don't have any list. We don't have like any super specific talking points, but this is something that, again, I don't think people have really talked about before and has become a really major part of Survivor at this point, and especially Exile Island. I mean, I can't even count how many quote unquote exile islands we've had before. So, we're pretty pumped about this.
Yeah. And it's something different because, like we keep saying, we don't want to just do lists every time because we'll run out of lists pretty fast. We're going to end up duplicating, and we like to leave some of the lists, like, a season ranking or something like that. We like to leave that for regular podcasts. So these are always going to be a little bit more random, and we're going to try to do like every other month where we're talking about, something that we're not listing. And with Extinction Island, Edge of Extinction coming up, and Extinction Island being something that's so ridiculously new and weird and different from every other season of Survivor we've seen, we were just thinking like, what has worked in the past and what hasn't? Because most people already think that Extinction Island isn't going to work. So if that's already your mindset going into Edge of Extinction, then you're probably hating the fact that this season's the next season of Survivor. But we've seen throughout history, Exile Island wasn't originated in Panama. It was originated in Palau. And we've seen how it's worked, throughout time. And I think it could be fun to just kind of talk about what has worked, what hasn't worked, what iterations of things have worked, what iterations haven't worked, and whether or not we actually think Extinction Island is going to be a success or not. Because I'll tell you what, when you hear Survivor Panama Exile Island, does anybody really think that it's going to be this huge, significant, great addition to the show? Probably not. And now it's on like, I would say like 75% of the seasons, at least some iteration of it, whether it's Julia going and living on her own or Debbie on Cochrane boat or whatever.
Carl went to Exile Island for a hot second.
Yeah.
So to your point, it's with Exile Island when it first premiered, that was like the point of the show. I mean, Panama and Cook Islands, that was a huge part of the show. Now it's almost used not so much as an afterthought, but I almost like view it as Advantage Island. Like they put you there when the numbers are off. You pick up some advantage that you're probably going to get regardless. If we're going to be super honest, I know that's not as exciting as a viewer. And then you just go back into the game. So now it's more used situationally rather than actually being a part of the game, except for this season where, like Phil said, if you don't like these types of Redemption Islands or the Pearl Islands Outcast twist, which we really didn't see the back end of, we didn't see any of the back end of that. Now we're at least getting a glimpse into it. So as negative as I have been about it, I'm much more excited than I originally was. And I think I like having the view into what it's going to be like on that island.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about the Pearl Islands one because we didn't get to see it. And like Pearl Islands was its own thing. If we went through themes of Survivor, that's when you would talk a lot about Pearl Islands. But I do think that starting off by just saying the original island of Survivor, the fact that they just marooned people on Borneo, that was the first, real thing that happened in Survivor here. Like the first real twist, you could almost say, was like you're being marooned off a boat, thrown onto an island. And I know that that's the premise of the show, but that's still like a twist on your life within itself. So, doing that worked. I mean, the locations early on mattered. It worked really well. Having, island seasons for the most part are generally better because you can, or at least more fun to watch because of challenge oriented things. You can do more with the challenges than you can in, let's say, Africa. Although I kind of miss the way that they did challenges in Africa and Gabon and all of that, like running around up a hill, up a mountain, whatever that was, rolling a boulder at people and almost killing people. But that was like your first real island is Borneo, and you know, obviously that works because now the show is going into its 30th season, but I just felt like it needed to be addressed that there was an island before we even hit these crazy twisty islands that, you know, it's twisting off of Borneo.
Yeah, and when Phil brought that up to me beforehand, I was like, I don't really get it. But it's such a good point because this show is so groundbreaking, and it's so simple to like just say we're gonna put some strangers in the middle of an island. Like you always hear, if you were stranded on an island, what 3 things would you bring with you? And this actually did that. So this paves the way for all of these other odd, twisty islands. But yeah, other than like Gabon and China and Australia and like a few random ones, pretty much every season was on an island.
Yeah, most of the seasons are on an island. I mean, a lot of them, or at least they're near bodies of water. Like Africa, I think, is the only one that wasn't near water, and that's why they had to give them the 100 gallons of water because it was just ridiculous how much they were like just dying in the middle of the desert.
What did they eat in Africa?
I think it was just beans.
No, coconut? Ugh.
It was just beans. Yeah.
So that's a big Tom lost all that weight. He was eating just like straight protein.
He was just eating beans and drinking water. Africa's got to be the toughest season, I would think. Seriously. Because the water they were drinking until they got the 100 gallons, there was nothing going on. So I think that had to have been the hardest season. And, you know, this isn't necessarily talking about like the twist of, you know, like in Pearl Islands where you're able to steal people and bring them over. Like when we're talking about island, like we mean like when you go and you're living like on your own, like the first instance of Exile Island, which was Janu in Palau, who had to go and live on her own. And this was the first time that we saw this. And if you remember, this was before we'd ever even seen a hidden immunity idol. So this was the real first huge change to Survivor, was somebody being exiled and sent off to live on their own. And obviously like the tribe swap was bigger, but this was like one of those moments where it was a really big change to the way the show had been going. It wasn't just swaps and players playing against each other. Now there was a fear that you could end up having to be on your own at some point. And then 2 seasons later, they just make that an entire thing within itself where Exile Island is the season and somebody's going there every single week. So clearly I would say in Palau, it worked, despite the fact that nobody wants to admit that Janu was the first person to ever go to Exile Island. And despite the fact that nobody probably wants to admit that Misty was the first person to ever go to Exile Island from the season.
Yeah, Misty is groundbreaking.
Like you didn't have the 2 most exciting players end up being the first 2 people to ever go to Exile Island, but it's still pretty cool that something that they just did halfway through a season ended up becoming such a huge part of the show moving forward, because then for the most part, we saw it in almost every season after season 12. And you started seeing like different iterations of it in Cook Islands, I believe. And Fiji, I don't know if Fiji had it, right? I think Fiji had it. But you know, like by the time you're getting to Gabon, even though it's not necessarily an island,
Gabon gets a name.
Yeah, you're getting like a really cool, like that whole Garden of Eden thing, and Sugar.
I was
with
saying the
apple.
Sugar Shack.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what and so you get to see that. And in Micronesia, we also had Kathy and Sari go to Exile Island first, and they were trying to find that idol together. And that was, I think, the first time that we saw 2 people from different tribes go. And that might be wrong. That might have happened once or twice randomly, but I remember that one specifically. And then that paved the way for Tocantins, which, Alexa, I know you love to talk about because that was pretty awesome.
Because I love that whole attempt at the alliance. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Micronesia was the first instance where 2 people from, I guess they must have been from separate tribes, or just 2 people in general were hanging out on Exile Island together. But what was I going to say on that? These earlier ones, like between Panama and Tocantins, like you just laid out, those ones are great because those had a clue, which led to another clue, which led to another clue. And what's his face? Yul found that in like the hottest second. And then the whole island almost became moot. Gosh. But at that point, like these, because there aren't tons of idols floating around these islands, these were actually like exile. Like the word exile in Exile Island has lost its meaning so much, and mostly just because it's been used so much. But I remember, you know what? Danielle and Austin were both there together in Panama. So there must have been something, because I remember what I was going to say is like, Exile Island is where you go back and you're like, I finally had my me time. And a lot of times they're super depressed. They're super rainy and cold. But Danielle and Austin, they kind of form this connection, which ultimately doesn't end up working for either of them. And so you see this happening. You see like tentative alliances being formed, but Exile Island used to be this like kind of sad, dark, retrospective place. And now it's like, I'm plucking my idol nullifier and getting out of here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because then you have a situation, you can go the other route where Julia Sokolowski ends up on Exile Island or Exile Beach, whatever you want to call it, and there was nothing for her. So she literally was just starving and tired and hungry and wet and whatever, and she was just there alone. And that is like the worst version, I feel like. Not that it's bad, it's just, I mean, it's still funny.
There's just no gain.
There's just nothing going on. There's nothing positive about going to Exile Island. And I honestly think that if you go to Exile Island and there's nothing positive there, that's fine, because, you know, that's how it should be. In Gabon, Sugar found that idol, and everybody who went to Exile Island after that didn't get anything, you know? And I know that she went most of the time, but anybody else who went never had a chance to find an idol, which I'm okay with. That's fine by me. We don't need to have people finding an idol every single time, like we pretty much do every season now.
Yeah, and to your point, like Julia's kind of the main example, at least in recent seasons, where there's really no gain from going there. In fact, it seemed like a loss. Like I remember when you guys interviewed her, she was just like, it sucked. It was like the worst day and a half of my life. Like no one from production is helping you. Like you are super on your own. But the whole, like, that's the name. It's Exile. It's not there to give you an advantage, because then everyone's going to be clamoring to go there, which you see people start to use to their advantage. People start looking for excuses to go there. Like Aris sent himself there. It happens pretty often now, or happened often then. But it's not meant to be an advantage. It's just meant to be there as Exile Island. And then we start to get more into, I guess, Redemption Island is what comes after that, after all these exiles, right?
Yeah, because they were trying to, like, Exile Island was a way to kind of save people. We saw it save Sally in Panama. We saw it save, I forget who else it saved over the course. I mean, it saved a lot of people over the course of its time. You know, not too many, but it was enough. But yeah, Redemption Island, it's crazy to think, because people always talk about Redemption Island like it's like the worst thing ever. And it's actually crazy to think now how long ago it was that the last time we saw Redemption Island, which was season 27. Because in season 29, I don't consider that Redemption Island. That was just like a challenge island where they, you know, Jeremy had to compete against Val, and who cares? Literally no one.
Husband and wife, screw that.
Yeah, no one cares. There was not the emotional drama that there was in the first Blood versus Water. But Redemption Island started off 8 years ago now. 8 years. Like, let that sink into everybody's head. 8 years ago was Redemption Island.
2010? 2011.
2011. Yeah, I know. That's what's even scarier, is that 2011 was 8 years ago. But yeah, Redemption Island was 8 years ago, and then we only saw it 2 more times after that. So as much as, or I'm sorry, it was only 2 more times after that. So as much as I hated Redemption Island, and as much as people like always talk about how bad Redemption Island was, the third and final iteration of Redemption Island was the best version of it. And I thought it worked remarkably, mainly because of how much was going on at Redemption Island. Like the first time, it was pointless. The first time it was like, you're going to get a second chance to get back into the game. Okay, cool. But these people have no connection to each other other than that they've known each other for 3 days. Yeah. And it was cool that Matt Elrod made it back in, gets voted out, and then makes it all the way to the last challenge and loses to Andrea, of all people. But it wasn't until we actually hit the Blood versus Water aspect of this, which I'll call like Redemption Island 2, that Redemption Island actually became good. And it's funny that they tried it twice after it failed miserably the first time, but then didn't try it again after it worked really, really well.
Yeah. I had a point. Oh, I don't know what like overall reception was. I mean, I'm sure overall reception of Redemption Island wasn't good, but looking back, it's so cool that like Matt Elrod falls in love with Andrea. He gets voted out, comes back in, gets voted out. Like that's how it works. It's almost as if Redemption Island was broken. Like it felt like that wasn't the way it was supposed to be used, which like it made for like a really probably the sole interesting part of that season. But you're right, with Blood versus Water, it's so much more emotional and so much more compelling because you're competing against your brother, your sister, whoever. But yeah, I think it's so much more successful in Blood versus Water seasons. And I do like. Again, this is something we probably won't have with Extinction Island. I like that everyone could come and watch. I like that they made it this whole like Greek Coliseum thing. There could be a little bit of drama. It gets to the point where with like I guess the first Blood versus Water. Yeah, first Blood versus Water. When everyone's like spitballing at each other and everyone's yelling at each other to throw out these clues in the fire. I love that. Extinction Island, I don't think we're going to get that because no one's going to know that they're there.
Yeah, and it in the first version of Redemption Island, part of the reason why it sucked so bad is because only like 1 or 2 people from each tribe were going to watch this. So like they would pick who gets to go, and like that's stupid. Like I don't care that Sarita and Ralph get to watch Russell Hantz lose the game. I don't care. It just doesn't mean anything.
Sarita, I think
remember Sarita? Yeah, you don't.
No, I don't. I guess I like that.
She's the one who.
Go ahead.
She orchestrated the Russell blindside, but go ahead.
Yes. I like that they could send 2 people because then they were like, ooh, we're going to lie. Even though I don't really know like how much information there is because like those people are probably going to be going home anyways.
And why did they get to lie? Like what did they do that was so special that made them, have the right to be able to go to Extinction or to Redemption Island and
they just chose. How did they decide the 2 to go? They just choose each other?
Yeah, they just picked. And what made Blood versus Water so good is that everyone went. Everybody was there, and you're cheering on the loved ones, and you're also rooting against other people's loved ones. And that's when we really saw Tyson actually become Tyson, where he was like, I'm going to take all of you down. And then he does, because nobody wanted Rachel to win. And then Rachel loses. And then he's like, screw you guys. I'm going to win this game. Like,
yeah, it just worked that way. Like the whole storyline was so perfect with that.
Whereas in the first Redemption Island, the storyline sucked because when Matt Elrod got back into the game, he didn't even have a second to play. And then he goes home and then he keeps on winning all these challenges. And then he loses to Andrea, who, people will say Andrea was a fan favorite, but I don't buy it. Her first time around. And so she wins and then just promptly gets voted out again by Rob. So it was just like whoever got in from Redemption Island just got voted out. And then we saw in the second version of of Redemption Island in season 23, we saw a really cool strategy when Ozzy elected to vote himself out over Cochran to make sure Christine couldn't come back into the game, despite the fact that Christine was ready to get rid of Apollo and Cochran was ready to get rid of Savai. But that was really cool. And that was probably about the only cool moment in that season. Was Ozzy electing to vote himself out so that he could have a chance to get the numbers even. And that worked, but the rest of the time, again, it was like, why am I watching this? I also wasn't a fan that like, sometimes there just wasn't going to be a challenge. And now there's 3 of us on Redemption Island. And oh boy, I can't wait to see who wins between Whitney and Duncan or Whitney and Keith. Oh, can't wait. Like it didn't mean
How did that work with, I don't even remember. How did that work with like when they did 3 people? Like they just decided to skip one?
Yes. So like what would happen is, and I remember this happened. Well, I mean, this did happen in Blood versus Water, but it was because they voted out Candace and Rupert right off the bat. And then they didn't do a challenge. And then when, was it Marissa who got voted out? I think it was Marissa. Marissa goes and Marissa ends up beating Marissa and Candace win and Rupert loses. So it was just the first person who lost who got out. But once it started to pile up, that was cool because more people are still in the game. But at the end of the day, do I really want to watch Andrea take on Grant, Matt, and Mike, and their positions are being determined by a challenge where you can just hold your foot up? Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. So I think Blood versus Water was when it started to become right, because then you had Tina versus Katie, which was great. I mean, I loved that when Tina was just like, sorry, honey, I'm winning.
I'm about to kick your ass.
That gate. I'll never forget her walking through that gate. That's amazing. But it's funny. Exile Island always makes appearances. You mentioned Carl. Carl finds his coconut on Exile Island. He gets the idol nullifier because of that. So it was a real big positive to him. Redemption Island doesn't have a way to just appear like once in a season the way Exile Island does.
Yeah, which that would be like catastrophic if it did.
Yeah, which just proves that Exile Island really is one of, if not the best idea that Survivor's ever had, because think about all of the classic moments that have come from Exile Island. Think about all the advantages that come from Exile Island, and you can use it anytime you want. You can use it as a one-off. You can use it like they did with Cochrane Island. You can use it however you want. And you can't do that with Redemption Island. You can't really do that with Ghost Island, despite the fact that Davey kind of did it in David vs. Goliath, but he didn't go to an island. So Redemption Island, I hate Redemption Island this season. I don't like South Pacific, but Blood versus Water always ends up near my top 10, if not in my top 10. And a lot of that had to do with things that happened at Redemption Island. So maybe that's why I'm a little excited for Edge of Extinction right now, is because I can't get a read on how Extinction Island's going to work. And I'm being like, hopefully cautiously optimistic, really more than anything, that it's going to be a nice merging of Exile and Redemption that creates an entirely new dynamic where not everybody's just going to it anyway. People are still leaving the game when they get voted out because it's not as important to some people as it is to others.
Mm-hmm. And I like that I feel like they might show a decent, like more content on Extinction Island rather than they did with any of the Redemption Islands, because this is so new and because there are probably going to be a lot of returnees floating around on there. So I think it's going to get more screen time, or maybe I just hope it's going to get more screen time, because there's still going to be some social politics going on in there. Like if you put Natalie Cole and Lyrsa in there, like it's going to explode. Like that would have been awesome. So, or you put like Bradley and Brendan there. Like those are experiences that I wish we got to see. The only thing that's disappointing, and this is kind of the same thing with the Redemption Islands, is only 1 or 2 people are going to come back from that. Mm-hmm. And they're still going to be at such a disadvantage. So like, unless it's Joe who's coming back and can do what Ozzy did, like if Aurora comes back, they could just be like, screw you, you're going back there. So the social politics will still be there, but it won't be as compelling because it'll just be inconsequential to the rest of the season.
But what I think will work so well for Extinction Island that didn't work for Redemption Island is Redemption Island had to have a challenge all the time. So
every week.
Yeah. And even if there wasn't a challenge that week, they would go there for a second and then hop back and there'd be a reward challenge and everything. But with Extinction Island, you're not having challenges. So unless somebody's quitting, we still need to know what's going on in Extinction Island, because we need to know the dynamic of these people. Who's feeling down on themselves? Who's feeling up? Who's feeling whatever? Because there's not a challenge. Who feels like they can't make it 10 more days until there is a challenge because they don't know how much longer it's going to last. And with people getting there and inevitably quitting and raising that white flag that's going to be on the mast of that ship, like Jeff has said so many times, with people inevitably doing that, you're going to have to spend a little more time there, because now it doesn't just focus on when there's going to be a challenge, which is what Redemption Island always did. Redemption Island was always only really important when there was a challenge. Extinction Island is going to be important pretty much all the time.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And so now that we're talking about it, Redemption Island probably spent 15 minutes per episode on Redemption Island because of all these challenges. And now that won't happen, you're right. They are going to be alluding to in like 3 weeks when someone's going to quit, and you'll see them crying or you'll see them upset or whatever. And they'll also, like, you'll want to hear from them, because I doubt they're going to know when this one challenge does happen. Like, I think when whoever is voted out first, they'll probably get a parchment that says, like, you will have an opportunity to get back into the game, but it's not going to tell them when. No. So the person who's voted out at 13th, like, they're probably going to have no idea that tomorrow they have a chance to get back into the game versus the person who's been there for 15 days already.
Yeah, and that's what makes it the hard part, is I could see them doing a lot of footage like that. Let's say Wendy gets voted out first and Wendy goes to Extinction Island, and Wendy's sitting there at Extinction Island and she's like, oh my God, I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to get back in the game. I need to get back in the game. I don't know what to do, whatever. They're going to show that content. That's going to be in there, especially if she either overcomes it or the first person to actually quit from Extinction Island is going to get a lot of screen time. I mean, remember, the first person who ever lost on Redemption Island played twice. So whoever's the first person to go to Extinction Island is going to get a lot of screen time. We saw it happen with Jacob with Ghost Island. It always happens when you're kind of the ambassador to that island. Even Janu, who wasn't a big character, got a lot the episode that she went there of her just like breaking down, and then she ends up quitting. And then you had a lot with Misty in that one episode. And really, Misty wasn't that bad of a player. It's just people don't remember Misty because she went home so quickly.
I think she could have been a good player.
Yeah, if she didn't go to Exile Island, she would have been fine. But because she went to Exile Island, everybody thought that she might have had an idol, not realizing that Terry was a god and that he was controlling Misty, not allowing her to find it so that he could then find it. But yeah, I think Extinction Island is going to be a big part of this season. And we'll, we can talk about Ghost Island. I mean, might as well talk about all of them at one time.
Yeah, I mean, let's get to it.
Ghost Island wasn't big enough of a part of its season. And there was too much time where people just did nothing, which is cool if it's Exile Island. But the fact that the entire season was based around Ghost Island and the fact that people are going to have chances to win things and do things, and then half the time people would go and say, nope, no game for you. Well, that's just boring. That's just a waste of my time. And I think Ghost Island was a huge, huge fail, except for the Chris thing. The Chris thing and Jacob finding the advantage, being able to give it to Morgan was fantastic.
I know. It's such a shame that Jacob and Morgan went pretty much, or they went back to back.
They went back to back.
And because that could have been such a cool, like, Chrissy and Ryan thing, and it just never went that way. I very much would like to see a Ghost Island too, and I think that's probably unpopular just because people hated how Ghost Island went, but I want them to tweak it because everyone was so excited about this kind of season. When we were doing the preseason podcasts about this, we had one podcast specifically like just to talk about the advantages and what Ghost Island's going to be like. Like there was so much to talk about there. And then for it to get just completely disappointed for half of the time spent there never went anywhere. I just thought that was a total waste. So I hope that they redo it. And this is hypocritical of me. I don't really know what they need to change because I don't want them just vending machine idols out, but I would like to see it again. I thought it was a really, really unique idea.
Well, we need to go back and listen to the Sunday Burquest podcast we did with that one because her take was just fantastic. It was like, maybe you just get more rice, or maybe you just get this, or maybe you get that. And it doesn't always have to be an advantage, but it's something. And when your season is named after what it is, it has to be a big part of the season. Like, think about Pearl Islands. When you think about Pearl Islands, you imagine the pirate theme because that's what happened on the Pearl Islands. The Islands of Fire. You remember like the earthquake they had. You remember them climbing that freaking lard pole at the beginning with like all the tribesmen around them with the fire. Like you have to use whatever you're calling it and make it a huge part of the season. And Ghost Island itself just wasn't big enough a part of the season. And sometimes you would be safe from a vote, and other times you came back for tribal council. And it was just like there was no rhyme or reason to it. And for as annoying as Redemption Island might have been in every version that wasn't Blood versus Water, at least you still knew that if somebody went to Redemption Island, the only way they could get back in the game was if they won whatever challenge they won. And that really, it didn't matter otherwise. Like that was just fine. Like you had them on Redemption Island. You could have them talking to the other people. They were eventually going to have to beat those people anyway, but it created a decent dynamic, and it was in every episode. Ghost Island itself wasn't even in every episode, and if it was, it would be walking up, no game today. I'm going to sit here, one confessional saying, I got no game today. Let's cut back to Dominic talking about his idol, because that's really what Ghost Island was. But I agree with you. I think that they could make it better if they ever made a second version. I just don't know if they will, because it is like detested amongst the community, and I don't think the producers liked it all that much either, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I think there was also just so much hype around it, which doesn't help. But I think you're right. I think production, I don't know if it's halfway through. I don't think they like how it went either, but I have to think that's, and I never like to blame the cast, because usually the cast is what makes a season so good. It makes a bad season good. I think it was a bad cast for it, and I don't know how. But I think just the wrong people got in power. Because I think if like Brendan, Bradley, James, Stephanie, Gonzalez, like that crew, Jacob especially, if they make it far and they're hanging out on Ghost Island all the time, it's going to be awesome. Like having Jenna go to Ghost Island just like meant nothing to me.
Yeah, and it was like, what? I think one of the more interesting ones too is when Kellen went. But then the first time Kellen went, didn't she have nothing to do? She chose not. Oh God, well, because I remember she wanted to trust her gut, and she was like, "I'm going to go this way," and then I think she chose nothing. Right? Was that what it was? And like that's cool. That can happen.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good moment.
That can happen, but like still, that meant Ghost Island for that episode was nothing. There was no backup plan with Ghost Island, so I don't know. Ghost Island is probably my least favorite of the islands because it felt so just thrown together. It felt like they tried to take the best moments from other things and put it into Ghost Island, and they just kind of dropped the ball on all of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because that someone posted, it might have been you who said this. Someone was like, if you're doing Ghost Island, you got to get those people to do it. Like, what does it mean to Wendell that he's holding Eric's immunity necklace that he gave to Natalie Bolton? Like, that means nothing to him. What does it mean to, who is it? Michael, who found James's idol? Like, that means nothing to him. Yeah, he was 2 when that season aired, but if James finds his own idol, or if Eric finds his own necklace, like, that means a lot more.
Yeah, and like, did Ghost Island look cool? Yeah, absolutely. But that was the end of it. I mean, there was not enough going on there.
Yeah, there are some definite tweaks. I would really like to see it again, but I want it to be tweaked correctly, but I don't know what those tweaks are. So what do I know?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about like One World. I always feel like it was just the wrong cast to have, because the only one who was willing to go across tribal lines was Colton, and then Colton ends up quitting. But if you could have had a cast, and don't split it by men and women, don't do that. I know that made it easier for the viewers because you knew who was on each tribe, men and women. But if you're going to do, if everybody thinks season 40 is going to be like Heroes Villains 2 or this Legends season or whatever the hell it's going to be, take those people, put them on one island, and let's see what happens if they just play One World. Because I think that could be so much fun. One World is such a fun idea that just was the wrong cast and was too short-lived. It was just, you need to take it from 20 and just say, we're not merging till 10. And, you know, you guys are all going to be living together, but you're not merging till 10. And make the island smaller. Don't give them room to go off on their own. Make it as big as a merge island so that there's really only one place that you could put a shelter. Maybe you can put the shelter in another place, but make it close. I don't think we'll ever see One World again, but I just think that's a really cool idea that ultimately just failed in the moment, but could have been great had it had a really, really good cast.
I know. What was the public reception like to One World? Because that was another one that I watched live. I watched all these kind of teen and early 20 seasons live, but I wasn't like a part of the community or anything. So were people like amped for this idea, or was preseason like super different back then?
I don't remember the preseason. I mean, I didn't start paying attention to preseason stuff until Worlds Apart. I remember being really amped for Redemption Island's preseason because we saw Eric Reichenbach in the preview for it. And I was like, oh man, they're going to bring Eric back. And Eric was like my favorite at the time. That didn't happen.
Wait, so why was Eric in the preview for Redemption Island?
Because it was like they did the preview when they did the preview for Redemption Island, like at the finale, and it was before they actually showed people were going to be on the season, and they showed Eric giving up his necklace because that's like always what they do. And I was like, always gonna be there. I was like, oh god, they're actually going to do Redemption Island, like they're going to show it, and they didn't. And Eric, I mean, he's going to be on Redemption Island, and then he wasn't. So that was a bummer. But in terms of One World, I think a lot of people were excited about the fact that it was going to be on one island. But then again, the only people that I was talking to about it were the kids in college who I forced to watch it with me, and then my family.
Yeah.
So I don't really know the community. I was just maybe getting into Sucks a little bit. But then again, Sucks is now what Reddit is now. So you can only imagine that they never get excited about anything except being obnoxious. And I have no problem saying that. I mean, you know, so it's hard for me to tell.
It was also probably pretty exciting because people love a like guys versus gals season. Like everyone is super into that. And Amazon was obviously incredibly popular. I think Vanuatu, I remember reading on Wikipedia, like wasn't popular in the moment, but has like probably still isn't, but like has its cult following. But there's nothing like simpler than guys versus girls. So I think that idea like gives it a little excitement. And then obviously that it didn't really work out the way that they wanted it to.
Well, and what hurts One World now is that Jeff has said he'll never do a guys versus girls season again. Just because it's 2019.
Which is like ridiculous. Oh, that's a very good point. But that's so stupid because like the first 2 guys versus girls seasons went exactly the way that they should have.
Yeah.
Like they were perfect.
They were. And then when One World, when the guys actually pull out the victory in the first challenge because Courtney Moon breaks her arm and Troy Zandon is, no, we're taking it. Like, you know, he can't hold himself back. That was a great moment. And then for the guys to just fumble their way through it. But Jeff said he'll never do a guys versus girls season again, which like I get, but also like
I don't know. I think that's dumb.
I don't get it. Yeah, I don't want to say anything wrong, but then again, I don't know who the $10 patrons who are listening to this are.
I mean, I don't see like, I don't know if this is so wrong, but I don't see the problem with it because it's not like, I mean, I think people are going to be way less, I'm going to put it out there. I think it's going to be way less like sexist than it was in Amazon. So I feel like it would be more PC now, but
it's the whole, I think, and now that we're turning into a politics podcast, but it's the whole classifying people as a guy or classifying people as a girl. And like, I don't know. It's like reality TV. When you're filling out your reality TV application, like, let's be honest, they're doing 9 men and 9 women. You know, even when Zeke was on it the first time, he's a man. So he was he was considered one of the 10 men for Millennials versus Gen X. So like, if you're doing a men versus women season, like Zeke would be on the male tribe. Like that, there's not like, I just think like it's one of those things where it's being like overthought. I almost feel like by Jeff, and that might be a reason why we never see One World again. But
because I think you just laid it out like super simply, like with the Zeke example. But I think you're right. I think they are overthinking it. They probably don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, especially, I mean, this is now so late, but I know there's a ton of Cook Islands backlash. So they probably just want to really
there was Cook Islands backlash at the time. And like, so there was
think about that now.
I know. Could you imagine if they did that now? If they tried to do that now, they'd be shot. But especially like since the Zeke thing happened on Survivor, I think the last thing they want to do is then make like draw any more attention to anything like that could possibly be in a not positive light, because that episode is one of the worst. It's one of the most brutal episodes of TV I've ever seen, because it's like Jeff Varner like slit the guy's throat on national television, and it's brutal. And I detect the attention they got from that episode was not positive. It wasn't like, oh good, this was a really profound positive moment, and Jeff tried to spin it that way. That's just not the way it went. It was seen as just ugly and horrible and terrible for Zeke and everything like that. And nobody wants that to happen again. So I think they're going to try to stay away from anything that has to do with gender as much as they can, but they will still always have their 9 men and 9 women or 10 men and 10 women. They just won't ever address it that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it had a positive is like so not the right word, because it was everything you said. It was brutal and ugly and horrible. I think it got the reception, like the positive reception, in the sense of like, you aired this appropriately or you handled this appropriately. It wasn't like this all went down and Jeff was like, yeah, fuck Zeke. Like that isn't. Yeah. So I think that's where the quote unquote positive reception came from. But because I guess they could not air it. I have no idea how I can't even imagine how they went about producing that episode. That must have been a whole disaster. But anyways, back to the islands. I guess we can talk about the final question mark one, Cochran yacht. I loved it. I know people didn't like that, but we really liked it when it went down.
It's just so ridiculous. And I talked to Cochran. I talked to Cochran at the finale from this season, and Cochran's like the coolest guy. So any of those Reddit people that I just insulted, if you're one of our patrons, don't rip on Cochran, because Cochran's really cool. And I know that we're like not the most positive on Cochran in terms of his gameplay, but Cochran's like one of the nicest survivors I've met. And I mean that. Like, I've met a lot of survivors, and Cochran is one of the nicest. He's so down to earth. He's just a really cool guy. So, I talked to him about that, and I was like, what did you think? Like, when they asked you about that, just what did you think? And he was like, I had to do it. There's no way I wasn't going to do it. And the way I look at it is like, is Cochran the best Survivor player ever? No. And was it played up like that when he came out and Debbie was like, oh my God, it's Cochran? Like, yeah, that's how it was played up. But if they were to do this with somebody else, I would be totally fine with them doing it again. Like, screw it. Who cares? If Ozzy is going to be sitting on an island for 10 minutes of my screen time, that you think it's going to help get viewership, that you think it's just going to be this little funny thing that's so ridiculous, just let it happen. I don't care. It didn't affect the game. Nothing happened because of it. Cochran just lost a lot of sleep, as far as I heard. Yeah. So, like, whatever.
Did they turn around and send him right back?
Yeah, they sent him right back.
Wow.
They sent him right back.
I liked it. I think it's absurd. I think the fact that it was Cochran, this either shows how the fact that it was Cochran either shows that Jeff is acutely aware of how much everyone can't stand the way that they're shoving Cochran down our throats, or he is so unaware of the fact that we can't stand that. Right. It's one way or the other, but I love that it was Cochran. I also, if it was like Cirie or Boston Rob or any of them, it would have been just as ridiculous. Like if I'm on Survivor and I get sent to Exile Island and instead I get to have a feast with Ozzy, like that's kind of cool. Yeah, it might not get me anywhere, but that's like a really ridiculous experience. And also the best part was Debbie didn't tell anyone. So say what you will about Debbie. She's smart. She knew she was hamming it up from the camera when she was calling him Mr. Cochran. And she didn't say that she went on that boat until people watched it live.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember our reaction to it at the time, why we liked it was that it can be positive sometimes. And sometimes Exile Island, like I get tired of, as much as I loved Julia suffering, you can get tired of watching people just go and suffer. So why not have it be something good every now and then? That's also not a ridiculous advantage. Like this was ridiculous, but in a different sense. This isn't an idol nullifier, an idol or an extra vote or anything like that. Just let it be something that's not the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your entire life. Like Julia probably, I think she has said, that day, those couple days were like, it can be positive. And yeah, I think the Cochran thing was just funny. And I like calling it Cochran Island, like Captain Cochran on his Cochran boat being on Cochran Island.
What Debbie got something out of it. What did she get? She had 3 options. Cochran gave her like 3 things. One of them was a fake idol kit, which she didn't pick because that would have been stupid. One was an extra vote, which she might have been the one she chose.
I forget what she chose. I think that it might have been. Yeah, I think that it might have been the extra vote. I don't remember.
Which she didn't end up playing correctly, I think. Yeah, because it ended up being inconsequential, and I can't remember what the third one was. It was, but the one that she chose was the quote unquote right choice.
Yeah, I remember that. But I like that because it was like giving you a choice. And like I wouldn't even mind that on like an Exile Island now moving forward, where instead of Carl running into the water to grab a coconut, maybe Carl has to choose. Do you want this idol or do you want this idol? And I think that could be really cool. So like, or maybe not even this idol or this idol, but like extra vote, or do you want a fake idol kit, or do you want this? Like whatever it is that you can get, what do you prefer? And I think that makes the islands better. And that's, kind of what Ghost Island was missing, was that it was just like, you have a 1 in 3 chance of pulling the right thing. Or you have a 2 in 3 chance of pulling, and it's like, who cares? Like, that's just complete luck. And I don't care. It's not fun for me to watch.
It was more fun to watch Debbie just like hang around with Cochran all day, which is not something I ever thought I would say out loud. But it was more fun. Like it to your point with Julia, like it finally made Exile Island kind of positive. Like other than that, even Sugar, she was on Exile Island so much. Half the time she was depressed. It took her a while to be like, wait, okay, this is my Sugar Shack. Now I'm gonna have fun. Not many people have fun on Exile Island, so it was a refreshing change of pace.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there's multiple ways to do everything and figure it out, but Extinction Island itself seems like it's going to be a miserable place, which it should be, because you've been voted out of the game. Julia didn't do anything wrong. She just pulled the wrong buff. But I think that Extinction Island should be miserable because you're out. And if you want to stay in the game, you should have to suffer to stay in the game. But I think that could add an element too, because the only people who are going to stay are the people who really want to be there. And I know everybody who gets voted off always says, I wish I could play again. I wanted to be there, whatever. But when we asked Davey, he mentioned Natalia right away, right? She's somebody who could withstand Extinction Island the entire time, from day 39 to from day 1 to day 39. She could have done it. He's like, that's the one. Everybody will say that they could do it, but once you're actually in that situation, you're not going to do it. And I think a lot more people are going to pull out than they think. And, this goes back to Palau itself. When Jeff Wilson rolled his ankle and was like, I'm done. I'm not playing anymore. There's no way Jeff Wilson ever expected to walk out onto the island in Palau and say, I'm done because I rolled my ankle. That's just not something he thought was going to happen. But it did. And those are things that happen once you get out there and your body starts, it actually starts to take its toll on you.
Yeah, I think this is the ultimate, what's it called? Armchair therapist. Monday, I don't know which I'm thinking armchair therapist.
Monday morning quarterback.
Or Monday morning quarterback. I don't think Monday morning quarterback is the right term I'm going to use, but you tell me after this. But it's so easy for us right now with our full bellies, very stable lives. None of our friends are trying to vote us out of our dream to be like, oh my God, these ridiculous people, how could they possibly be quitting? All they talk about is wanting their second chances. It is so different when you're sitting there alone for 10 days, having no food, no water, no end in sight. it's like, this is a waste of my time. So I'm really curious to see where both I and like the world is going to stand on people quitting Extinction Island.
Yeah, it's going to be weird because it's a quit every time. It's a quit. Like, you're literally deciding to not stay in the game, which is a quit. And yeah, you've been voted out, but you're still in the game until you quit and walk away. And you can't hold it against everybody. There's a big difference between the people who are going to quit from this and the people who quit, like, I don't know, Shamar, Austin. Although Austin, he was still going to get voted out, and it was at a tribal anyway. He wasn't going to get voted out, but it was at a tribal.
Janu, I think Janu kind of
Janu was probably really the first. Well, no, Sue Hawk was the first quit. Sue Hawk literally. Oh, Jenna Maraska was the first quit because she went first.
Yeah, that's like a different quit.
Jenna Maraska made sense. Sue Hawk's made sense too.
Was okay.
At the time, nobody gave a shit, which is
horrifying.
I know. I wanted to use the word hilarious because it kind of is that was what 15 years ago, and everybody thought she was just an old hag. Nobody cared.
Like when did I watch All Stars? When I started this podcast 2 years ago, and I was like, what in God's name is everybody doing? Like, this is absurd.
Richard Hatch is not wearing clothes, and he's pumping that woman. But anyway, that would totally fly nowadays. I'm sure that people
especially in the man versus woman season.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that Richard Hatch wouldn't have been fired from his job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, wonderful. Anyway, but like, so I guess like Jenna Maraska and Sue Hawk were the first ones to quit, but there's reasonable quits. Like Dana Lambert in Philippines was kind of a reasonable quit. She was so sick, it wasn't going to work. Yeah. And then there's like I just don't want to be here quits.
Colton's blood versus water quit.
Colton's blood versus water quit, where he just cried and like went and sat in Caleb's lap.
Yeah. And hilarious. Jeff just like destroyed him.
Yeah. And there are others who have done that, I'm trying to think who are like some infamous quitters, because Austin's, it was a quit, but the entire tribe decided they were going to vote him out. Brandon Hance's wasn't a quit. He was literally being pulled from the game. I don't even know why they tried to show that as a vote.
I mean, this isn't infamous, but who was the girl who quit in Cagayan because she didn't like Trish?
Oh, Lindsay. Yeah, Lindsay. That was a quit. That's like a blatant quit. Kathy Sleckman was pulled off the island. I remember that.
Yeah. Because they framed it like a quit.
Yeah, right? But they thought that she was gonna like harm herself or someone else.
Yeah, so that's okay. Like, we are glad.
Yeah, we get that. But if you're looking at it in terms of like a classic quit of a Colton, I don't want to be here anymore. Of an Austin, I don't want to be here anymore because okay, fine, I'll just call it a quit now. Of Janu, I don't want to be here anymore. If you're looking at it in terms of that, these aren't even close to that because you've already been voted out and you're not in the game. You're not there. You might never even get a chance to be back in the game. So it's going to be interesting how people perceive everybody because 15 people or so are going to have to, at least 7 people are going to walk off that island.
7, that's the number we're rolling with.
Well, I'm going to say at least 7 because maybe there's going to be 6 people who are in that final challenge to get back into the game, but at least 7 are going to walk off. It depends on the combinations, whatever. But if 7 people walk off, are we really going to call all 7 of them quitters and like never let them play Survivor again? I think that would be ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I feel like not we so much, but I think the internet is so harsh on quitters. And to your point, like there's a very stark difference between the types of quitters. Like the quitters because a family member is about to pass away or because you were like kind of sexually assaulted on national television is very different from, oh, this game isn't going the way that I want it to, so I'm going to quit after being given a second chance. So I think it's like a moving target, but I'm really excited to see how that part goes.
Yeah. Well, that's like 45 minutes. I mean,
I'm really impressed about Island. That.
Or we could probably cut it at that, and you could give like your little pitch. We could do our power rankings pitch now. So anybody who made it this far, we'll have to tell everybody listen like the last 5 minutes of this if you're a $20 patron. Mm-hmm. We're thinking for power rankings, Tuesday night by like 8 o'clock. So you have to get it in 24 hours before the episode airs. 8 o'clock Pacific is fine because
whatever. Don't look much into it.
Yeah, exactly. Just get it to us by Wednesday at midnight, really. But you know what? Just get it to us.
Just send it to us.
Yeah, send it to us. The easiest way to send it to us, that's what we'll have to figure out. I guess the easiest way is, you know more about this than me. Is it to just Facebook message us? Should they email us? What do you think the best way to do it is?
I mean, at first glance, I want to say email. People don't really use their email too much. I would say like do whatever you want, but it might be a little annoying for us to go like through our through our DMs, and then that's just. I don't think it's horribly difficult because there's only like 15 or so people.
I think that email is fair. Just like we can send, like we can say, oh no, we can look through who our $20 patrons are and if they're in the Facebook group, which they should be.
Everyone's been invited to it, but maybe we post in the Facebook group, and maybe can't you message on Patreon all the $20 people? We'll just send like a weekly reminder.
We could probably do that, yeah. Or we could even say like you could just message us on Facebook or something and just give us your power rankings. But anyway, get us your power rankings. We're not doing it until after the first week, so we have a little bit of time to figure it out. The winner of it's going to get a buff. If you miss a week, you just get 0 points for that week. So like you'll still be able to participate, and maybe you'll still be good enough that you'll be able to win. But if you miss like week 2, and that means there's 16 people left, and you get a 0 and somebody else gets 16, you're gonna have a really hard time making that comeback. So good luck. But yeah, we'll just submit it each week, and probably actually on Facebook. It's probably the easiest, but
yeah, Facebook's probably easiest. Whatever works for you guys. Like we're between the two of us, like we're checking everything all the time, so we'll be able to find it. And like Phil mentioned in our Prop Bet podcast that we just did, we'll probably do like a once a week or once every other week, just like quick 10-minute podcast of just like where you guys are, where we are. Because I'm sure because it's such a small group, like I'm sure you'll want to know like where you stand versus Phil and I. And we're also, I guess we can announce this, like we're going to try to get a guest for every single prediction that we do. So I think we might actually be able to make that happen this season. We got like a close to it the 2 seasons ago. So you'll be competing with some survivors too. So that's always fun.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can see how you stack up against, each of them. And the first guest is, of course, going to be Bradley. So we'll just throw that out there now.
Yeah,
of course it's going to be Bradley. I mean, I see Bradley, so like it's easy.
We did try to offer to someone else who is going to be our third guest, but that person was going to be on a really cool vacation. Yeah, so we have our first, third, and fourth. We don't know about our second yet, and then everything after that we have to just reach out. I mean, I feel like everybody on Ghost Island would do it. So anyway, spoiler alert: this is going to be what Millennials vs. Gen X was the last time. Yeah, exactly. But if our second person comes through, we've reached out to somebody. If our second person comes through, that would be a really fun one. Yeah, this will be really cool. We have a couple like different people who I know we kind of have our regulars. We have a couple different people who we intend to reach out to. So one from like one or two from 2 like old and somewhat forgotten seasons. So we're really hoping we can get them on. Yeah. And that will be our mysterious comment of the night. Yeah, there you go. So I guess there's really no way to close this out because we don't have to say like join our Patreon. Yeah. So thank you for being a patron. I'm sure you've already subscribed to all of our social media, but we're super pumped for the premiere, which is will be over in exactly a week from right now. So yeah, we'll see you guys in a week. Thank you for listening. Hope you had fun. I have to do it.